The comic book industry is now officially dead. Comic books aren't going to exist anymore. They're all going to spontaneously explode. Also, Kathleen Kennedy is going to be fired. Probably in some undetermined time that's not too far away, that way you get excited, but also kind of far away, that way you don't remember and hold me accountable once you realize that never actually happened. Okay, so in all seriousness, we're going to be talking about Diamond Distribution, the main distributor for comic books. So maybe you guys have probably heard that Diamond, which has been, the biggest comics distributor in, several decades, is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I remember seeing a lot of people on Twitter basically saying, this is the end, the comic book industry is over, it's all over now. But that's hardly the case. And just as a brief explanation, have you ever been to a JCPenney or seen one at the mall? And maybe after you bought some clothes there, you went to the Sbarro's Pizza. And then you decided you wanted a comic book. But on your way there, you passed by an old store which used to be a Toys R Us. And that breaks your heart, knowing that it no longer exists. And you reminisce at all the good times you had there. But you can't stand there all day, so you head finally to the comic book shop and you grab a copy of Ultimate Wolverine #1. Now, the point of this story is that all of the mentioned businesses actually filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy at one point. JCPenney is one of the more recent examples, but after they filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, they were no longer publicly listed and now they're a privately held company, so you can't buy JCPenney stock anymore. Sbarro's was also pretty recent too. They ended up facing severe financial difficulties during the lockdowns because people were no longer going to malls and shopping centers, which is where they get all of their traffic. They don't do delivery, they don't have frozen pizzas, people don't go do dine-in. People buy Sbarro's because they're at the mall or the airport or something and it just happens to be there. This is for the most part an untapped niche, so it's actually allowed them to facilitate very large growth. However, this is really problematic at a time where people don't go outside and people stay isolated in their homes. At that time, I'm sure companies like Papa John's and Domino's flourished. Now, I need to reiterate something really important because you might get the wrong idea of what I'm saying. I'm not saying Chapter 11 bankruptcy is a good thing, and I'm not even saying that it's not a terrible thing, because it is a very bad thing. And that's actually why I mentioned Toys R Us, because, well, Toys R Us once upon a time was a thriving company. And I'm sure many of us probably have great memories there. Maybe because you were a kid and you would buy a lot of cool toys, or maybe you're a parent and you would buy, your children's stuff at Toys R Us. Speaking of Toys R Us, I feel pretty sentimental now, and I wish I could just roam those aisles again, looking at stacks and stacks of an infinite amount of toys that you couldn't get anywhere else. And if you just wish that you could get one final opportunity to roam those aisles one more time, then today you're in luck, because I have a time machine. Okay, well, not actually a time machine, but there's a video of Ethan Van Sciver from Comic Artist Pro Secrets and Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers where they go to a closing of a Toys R Us and they roam the aisles and they just fill up their carts with an immense amount of Star Wars toys, more particularly Rose Tico, who many describe as the epitome of the sequel trilogy. They were just shelves and shelves loaded with them, almost like no boy wanted to buy this action figure. Well, Ethan and Jeremy did, and it's pretty funny to see what they ended up doing with it. I have a little bit of a supercut here.
You guys, if you're in town, if you're in the area, you want to come to the Toys R Us by the Florida Mall, you can come toy shopping. We'll buy some Rose Tico with me and Jeremy. Oh, look at this.
Just shut it down and we'll start it back here.
I think that's probably best. They're all females. Ew. Ew. Is it a woman? It is. It's another female character. That is, I don't want women to take it personally that only the female characters are still available and they are on clearance, but that seems to be the case, and I don't want to draw any conclusions. You're going to watch me purchase as Toys R Us closes for the last time. We are going to, I don't know, I'm making that up. That's for drama. That's for drama. As Toys R Us closes for the last time, we purchase all of the Rose Tico toys.
I'm going to go look at video.
And we try not to hurt children who get in our way. Let's go. I hope you guys have a suitable sense of reverence in your hearts for what is happening. What needs to be done with Rose Tico toys right now. It's kind of like proselytizing. It's kind of like the good word of Rose Tico. We want to make sure that all the cars in the parking lot, make sure there's no one in here who will kill me.
Rose Tico.
Will you push the car?
So Uncle Ethan is now he's basically Uncle Ethan Santa right now. So he's spreading the Rose Tico joy all through Orlando. So all of these Toys R Us employees that are depressed for losing their job, they're going to walk out to their car and they're going to be, they are going to walk out and be ecstatic. It's like winning the gender lottery.
Who's honking?
I don't know. Is he pissed because you gave him a rose? he wants a refund.
You can go over here.
I don't know if they can hear me talking. Can you guys hear me talking with the shopping cart?
Let's leave the shopping cart. I'll just take my bag out.
Jar Jar on cars. Please don't get shot. Dude, this guy's pissed. He's still blowing the horn.
What's he pissed about?
I don't know, but he is pissed.
I gave it to him. I put it in his hand.
He's furious. He's furious.
How could he be so angry? He saw me give him the Rose Tico.
Just remember, hey, if we do get shot tonight, at least go sub to Geeks and Gamers tonight.
But if you want to see the whole live stream, I'm going to link it at the end of this video. Now, there's something else I want to talk about with Toys R Us, because many of us, when we see all of these empty Toys R Us stores, we just remember, oh, Toys R Us is gone, it doesn't exist anymore. Well, actually, it technically does. And, as I previously brought up JCPenney, which managed to successfully come out of a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, Toys R Us now will be operating exclusively inside Macy's. Basically, there will be like a little section of the store that sells toys, and it's obviously not as big or as grand as, Toys R Us used to be, but it's a little bit of a remnant of Toys R Us per se. Now, in this story I mentioned at the beginning of this video, when I mentioned going to a comic book shop to get, a new comic book and you end up getting a Marvel one, it's important to note that in 1996, Marvel also filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company went from being publicly traded to now being owned by a few different people. There was a whole lot that contributed to this. Most notably, there was a huge comic book boom in the early 90s, and now that bubble popped and it was going through a crash. They were also facing some severe challenges from a lot of their superstar artists that they'd hired. People like Rob Liefeld, the creator of Deadpool, Jim Lee, and most notably Todd McFarlane, who ended up forming a company with the aforementioned artists and others called Image Comics. Marvel was facing a little bit of brain drain, but it also reflected poorly on them that their superstars all left at the same time. I think the biggest issue here, though, is that Marvel saw skyrocketing revenue with the comics boom, but they just assumed that revenue would keep increasing or stay where it was at, and they weren't expecting a huge pop, and so, or at least for the pop to be as big as it was. And so what ended up happening is when the pop happened, they didn't have the agility and the resources necessary to stay afloat, and they ended up crashing. There's a lot of things that Marvel has since lost. Their autonomy is one of them. They're not publicly listed on the stock exchange now. They're just a subsidiary of Disney. Regardless of the scenario, Chapter 11 bankruptcy is always going to have significant changes on a company. It could mean that the company ceases to exist completely, or even that it exists in perpetuity, but as this shriveled corpse that's technically alive, but just a vegetable and a mere shadow of what it once was, sort of like in the case of Toys R Us. Or it could continue its normal operations like JCPenney, and you might not even notice that anything happened, and maybe it's just a change of ownership. There's really a wide spectrum of possible outcomes, but regardless, Marvel and DC don't need Diamond to exist. I think out of all of the bankruptcies that I mentioned earlier, the one that Diamond is most similar to is probably Marvel, because you see, Diamond was the only distributor for Marvel and DC for several decades, and they got accustomed to this monopoly in distribution and just assumed they would always have very high revenue. Just like JCPenney and Sbarro were heavily shaken by the lockdowns, Diamond was too. At this time, supply chains were in shambles. Diamond ended up pausing their distribution of comics from April to May of 2020, and while they were once exclusive with Marvel and DC, those two companies decided to open up their relationship. They started seeing other people, as Diamond was no longer able to satisfy their comic book needs. So in the worst case scenario for Diamond, they could stop existing completely. But if that situation arises, the comic book companies are no longer putting all of their eggs in just one basket. So that doesn't mean that comic book shops will just suddenly stop existing. It's also really important to note the difference between Chapter 11 bankruptcy and Chapter 7. Back in July, Redbox had a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. They no longer exist at all. And all these red boxes are scattered across the nation like decaying corpses, a window to the past. And since Redbox no longer exists, Walmart and Walgreens were trying to figure out how they could get rid of all of these machines. They were just being thrown away. And there were a lot of people who started looting them too. something that I condemn. So to reiterate, there's a huge difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 11 bankruptcy. With Chapter 7, a company dies right on the spot, but with Chapter 11, the company is put on hospice, and there is a chance that they could end up surviving. A Chapter 11 bankruptcy gives a company a chance to restructure, reform, and see if they can find a way to pay back their debt. So in the end, Diamond could come out on top as if nothing really happened, or there could be some very severe changes. Regardless, it's important to note that Diamond's relevancy has significantly faded since 2020. And in the worst case scenario, they'll stop existing, but that doesn't mean that all the comic book shops in America will. That isn't to say that this won't be difficult or cause any problems, though it is still a negative sign. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, why don't we open up our YouTube relationship? I don't mind if you see other YouTubers. Maybe I'm not enough to satisfy you. And if you enjoyed those clips I made of Jeremy and Ethan scouring a dying Toys R Us, then maybe you should go watch the full video on Ethan's channel. That's right, I'm cucking my YouTube channel to Ethan Van Sciver. But I'm doing this for you. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, or...
You are a hoe-ass